The sharp bark pierced the calm air of the suburban supermarket parking lot, turning heads and freezing footsteps mid-motion. Officer MIA Sandoval, a seasoned K-9 handler with 10 years of service behind her badge, snapped her head toward the sound. Her partner, a majestic sable German shepherd named Rex, stood rigid, his muscles taut and his deep brown eyes locked on the entrance to the sliding glass doors of the store. He gave a low growl, barely audible but full of warning. Something wasn't right. MIA knew better than to question him. Rex had been by her side through drug busts, hostage situations, even a shootout once in an abandoned warehouse. He never reacted like this without a reason. Her pulse quickened. She tightened her grip on his leash and jogged toward the entrance, brushing past a mother with a shopping cart full of groceries and a man fumbling with car keys. The air conditioning from inside the store greeted her with an artificial chill, but it didn't ease the tension coiling in her gut. Inside, everything appeared normal at first. People milled about, pushing carts, comparing prices, chatting casually. But Rex's demeanor hadn't changed. If anything, his growl deepened. Then he pulled hard to the right, toward the baby products aisle. MIA followed quickly, muttering apologies as Rex tugged past startled shoppers. The scene unfolded in an instant. A young woman, maybe in her early 20s, stood frozen beside a stroller. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. "My baby, he's not breathing," she cried, voice shrill with terror. The tiny infant lay limp in the stroller, his face tinged with a blue hue that turned Mia's stomach. "Call 911. MIA barked at a bystander. She knelt beside the stroller, quickly assessing the baby's state. She had basic first aid training, but she wasn't a medic. Still, she couldn't stand by. She gently lifted the baby and began CPR, counting compressions in her head, ignoring everything else around her. Rex sat beside her, unusually still, like he understood the gravity of the moment. People began to gather, murmurs rising like a tide of dread. The mother sobbed beside MIA, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "He was fine, just 5 minutes ago." "I don't know what happened," she wailed. MIA continued her compressions, silently pleading for the baby to respond. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the baby let out a weak, gurgling cry. The blue faded slightly from his cheeks, and he began to breathe on his own, shallow but steady. A collective exhale passed through the crowd. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Paramedics burst into the store moments later and took over, checking the infant and loading him gently onto a stretcher. MIA stepped back, her hands trembling, adrenaline still surging through her. "You saved him," the young mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. MIA shook her head, motioning to Rex. Rex did. "He knew something was wrong before anyone else did," she said. She gave her partner a scratch behind the ears. Rex leaned into her touch, but his eyes hadn't relaxed. He was still on high alert, sniffing the air, his ears perked. MIA felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. As the paramedics wheeled the baby out, one of them glanced at MIA. "You were lucky to be here." A few more minutes, and it might have been too late. But Rex wasn't done. As the crowd dispersed, the mother now trailing behind the stretcher in a daze, Rex suddenly pulled again, this time toward the opposite end of the store. His urgency hadn't faded, if anything, it had intensified. MIA hesitated for a moment, then gave chase. They weaved through aisles of cereal and canned goods, past the frozen food section, and finally toward the back storage area marked employees only. The door had been left slightly ajar. MIA paused, her hand going to the small pistol at her waist. She glanced down at Rex, who was quivering with tension, his nose almost to the ground. MIA pushed the door open slowly. The hallway behind was dimly lit, lined with boxes and crates stacked high. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like a swarm of angry bees. Rex advanced cautiously, pausing occasionally to sniff the floor. Then he barked, once, loud and urgent, and sprinted down the corridor. "Rex, wait!" MIA followed at a jog, passing supply closets and break rooms until Rex stopped abruptly in front of a door with a peeling manager's office label. He began to paw at it, barking again. MIA knocked. No response. Police? Anyone in there? She called out. Nothing. She tried the handle, it was unlocked. The office was small and cramped, cluttered with papers, shelves of inventory records, and an old desktop computer. It would have been unremarkable if not for one thing. The pungent, bitter smell that hit her nose the moment she stepped inside. A smell she knew all too well, chemicals. Solvents. Cleaning agents, but not the kind used for mopping floors. She'd smelled them in clandestine drug labs before. Rex was already inside, sniffing frantically at a tall cabinet against the far wall. MIA approached cautiously and opened it. What she saw made her stomach drop. Inside were several large jugs labeled with chemical names: pseudoephedrine, acetone, red phosphorus. Her mind raced. This wasn't a janitor's cabinet. This was a meth lab starter kit. Her heart pounded. She backed out slowly and called it in. Within the hour, the supermarket was swarming with officers, detectives, and DEA agents. The building was evacuated, the makeshift lab sealed off for hazmat inspection. An officer pulled MIA aside to give her a quick update. The baby was stable, resting in the hospital, and doctors expected him to recover fully. Carbon monoxide exposure was suspected. Carbon monoxide? MIA asked, confused. Yeah, the paramedic said. We ran the mother and baby through tests, low-level exposure, but enough to cause symptoms in the infant. Probably from some source inside the building. That source, MIA realized with a sickening chill, might have been the chemical fumes wafting from the hidden lab. Maybe someone had rigged the HVAC system, or maybe it was just leaking into the air from poor containment. Either way, it could have killed that child, and maybe others. But it didn't end there. Detective Alan Ruiz, who had arrived with the narcotics team, leaned in close to MIA as they stood near the crime scene tape. This wasn't an accident, he said grimly. We ran a background check on the store manager. He's got a sealed juvenile record and a couple of sketchy ties to known traffickers. He disappeared 20 minutes before we got here. Security footage shows him leaving through a rear entrance right after the baby incident. You think he knew something was about to go down? MIA asked. I think he was involved in more than just cooking meth, Ruiz replied. And the baby collapsing? That might not have been bad luck. It might have been a test. Mia's blood ran cold. A test for what? We don't know yet. But I got a feeling this whole thing was a distraction. A smokescreen. MIA looked down at Rex, who sat silently by her side, eyes scanning the parking lot. And if it was, she murmured, then what were they trying to cover up? That night, as she reviewed her report back at the precinct, MIA couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was lurking beneath the surface. She stared at the crime scene photos, the strange chemical setup in the manager's office, the oddly timed collapse of the baby, the missing manager. None of it added up neatly. And Rex, even hours later, he was still restless. He paced in her apartment like he was tracking a scent only he could detect. At one point he whined at the door and stared at her with wide, expectant eyes. MIA crouched down beside him, brushing his fur. You're trying to tell me something, aren't you? She whispered. Rex didn't move, only looked toward the window. Outside, the city lights flickered like silent warnings in the night. MIA didn't know what lay ahead, but she had a gut feeling that the case was far from over. The supermarket bust was just the beginning. Someone had gone to great lengths to set up a lab in a public place, risking dozens of lives, and the supposed accident with the baby had turned attention right to it. But what if the baby hadn't been the main victim? What if he was just the bait? She barely slept that night. And she wasn't the only one. Hundreds of miles away, in a quiet room inside a government facility that didn't officially exist, a man in a grey suit watched supermarket security footage on a loop. He paused on the frame of the baby's collapse, then again on Rex's charge through the aisles. He rewound the footage several times, his eyes narrowing. Then he turned to the man seated beside him, who wore a clean white lab coat and a badge marked with a symbol MIA had never seen before. "It's time to accelerate the timeline," he said flatly. The man in the lab coat nodded. "And the dog?" The man in the grey suit didn't hesitate. "Find out how much it knows." Rex didn't sleep. He paced the apartment like a soldier on night patrol, his ears twitching at every creak and shift of the city beyond the windows. Officer MIA Sandoval had drifted into a restless sleep on the couch, uniform shirt half unbuttoned, her duty belt slung over the armrest, her face pale in the dim light of the kitchen lamp. She murmured something under her breath and shifted slightly, but Rex remained vigilant. There was something still out there, something unfinished. He felt it in his bones. The baby in the supermarket had just been the first sign. By morning, MIA awoke groggy but alert. She blinked at the soft click of Rex's nails on the wooden floor and immediately knew he hadn't slept. She rubbed her eyes, stood, and knelt beside him, placing her hand gently on his head. "What is it, boy?" Still on edge. Rex didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the apartment door as if waiting for something, or someone, to arrive. MIA sighed and ran a hand through her tangled hair. "I feel it too. Like there's more we're not seeing." She stood up, checked her phone, and found 3 missed calls from Detective Ruiz. Her heart skipped. She called him back immediately. "Ruiz. It's Sandoval. You called?" "Yeah. I didn't want to alarm you last night, but we got something from the supermarket surveillance hard drive. It's not just the manager who disappeared. There's another guy. Tall, black coat, sunglasses, never enters the aisles. Just lingers. He walks in about 5 minutes before the baby collapsed, then walks straight out the fire exit 2 minutes before we arrived. Could be coincidence, MIA said. Except the fire exit was supposed to be locked. And the footage glitches exactly as he passes the security cam facing the back hallway. As in, someone wiped that feed. MIA frowned. You think he sabotaged the baby? No idea. But we did a facial scan, no matches in any law enforcement or federal database. And that's unusual. MIA glanced over at Rex. You think he's the one Rex was tracking after the baby was safe? Maybe. Or maybe he's tied to whoever set up that chemical stash. Either way, we're not letting this go. Anything else? Yeah, Ruiz said, voice dropping. That kid, the baby, his blood tests came back. It wasn't just carbon monoxide. They found trace amounts of a synthetic compound no one could immediately identify. Sent it off to a lab in DC. The feds are interested now. Someone from Homeland Security's en route to talk to us. That sentence made MIA pause. Homeland Security? Yeah. And they want to meet you and Rex specifically. 2 hours later, MIA sat in a drab, windowless conference room inside the precinct's East Annex, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching Rex lie at her feet, his body still tense. The door creaked open, and 2 figures stepped inside. One was a woman in a sleek black suit with piercing grey eyes and a badge that simply read, Agent Kara Monroe, DHS. The other, a younger man in a white button-up shirt and vest, carried a briefcase and had a distant, distracted look in his eyes, like he was always solving equations in his head. Officer Sandoval, the woman greeted, extending a hand. This is Dr. Eli Chen. He's a biochemist and forensic analyst from the Department of Defense. May we sit? MIA nodded, motioning to the chairs. We won't waste your time, Monroe began. The substance found in that baby's bloodstream is highly classified. It's part of a synthetic compound that was under development in a defunded military program, a drug originally designed to stimulate advanced cognition and sensory awareness in soldiers under stress. The project was shelved 5 years ago after it produced unintended side effects. Side effects? Neurological damage. hallucinations, seizures. In one case, death. It was deemed too unstable. MLA blinked. How does that end up in a baby at a grocery store? That's what we're trying to find out, Dr. Chen replied. What's more alarming is that the batch we tested wasn't one of ours. It's a modified version. Someone has not only recreated the formula, but they've altered it. Monroe leaned forward, her eyes sharp. The formula was never made public. The only way this version could exist is if someone on the inside, someone with access, stole it. MIA glanced down at Rex, who was now watching Monroe with eerie stillness. So you think this supermarket incident was a test run? That's one theory, Monroe answered. Another is that it was an accidental leak. But the setup was too clean. Too intentional. Why the baby? Chen opened his briefcase and slid a few photographs across the table. Grainy stills showed the mystery man in the black coat moving past the produce aisle, holding what appeared to be a metallic canister under his coat. Another frame caught him near the baby's stroller, his hand barely grazing the handlebar. Contact exposure, Monroe said. Our guess is, the baby was chosen at random. Or maybe, not so random. MIA stiffened. What do you mean? We ran the mother's name, Emily Hartman. 2 years ago, her brother was a senior technician at a facility contracted by the DoD for biomedical testing. He died in a lab explosion labeled accidental equipment failure. You think this is connected? We think someone's tying up loose ends, or testing the effects of their product on people connected to the original program. And you said Rex sensed it first? Dr. Chen asked. MIA nodded. Before I even stepped foot inside. He barked and pulled toward the store. Once inside, he led me straight to the baby. And afterward, he tracked something all the way to the manager's office. Dr. Chen looked intrigued. Has he ever reacted to chemical compounds before? He's trained in narcotics detection, explosives, crowd control. But not synthetic toxins. No. Chen scribbled something in a notebook. Monroe cut in. Here's the thing, officer. If Rex picked up the compound scent, it could mean two things. One, that it has a detectable odor under specific neurological profiles. Or two, and this is more complicated, that he's already been exposed to something similar before. MLA blinked. What are you saying? I'm saying someone may have been testing this compound in environments we didn't know about, and it's possible Rex encountered it previously without your knowledge. Are you accusing someone in our department of? No, Monroe interrupted. I'm suggesting Rex may be the key to finding out how deep this goes. We'd like to run tests on him, non-invasive scans, blood work. Nothing harmful. With your consent, of course. MIA hesitated. Rex was her partner, her family. But the idea that someone out there was experimenting with weaponized chemical compounds, and that they might already have infiltrated civilian spaces, made her stomach twist. If it helps stop whoever's behind this, you can run your tests. But I stay with him. Of course, Monroe nodded. We wouldn't have it any other way. That afternoon, in a mobile DHS unit parked behind the precinct, Rex sat patiently as Dr. Chen ran scans and took samples. MIA stood beside him the entire time, talking softly to keep him calm. What they discovered shocked even the scientists. Rex's olfactory system had undergone subtle neurological shifts, enhancements, almost as if his sensory input had been altered by long-term exposure to low levels of a synthetic compound. His blood showed faint traces of an unknown marker, similar to the compound found in the baby, but different. Stable. Dormant. Incredible, Chen murmured. He may have developed a resistance, or something more. What does that mean? MIA asked, her hand resting on Rex's back. It means Rex didn't just detect the compound. He may have been genetically altered by it, accidentally or otherwise. Someone exposed him, maybe months ago. And now, he can sense it before symptoms even appear in others. A living early warning system, Monroe said. And if that's the case, we need to find out who else was exposed. And why. That night, as the sun set in bruised hues over the city, MIA and Rex stood on the rooftop of the precinct, watching the traffic below. The air was thick with humidity, and yet Rex stood tall, alert, his ears twitching every few seconds. I don't know what they did to you, MIA whispered, but they're not going to get away with it. She didn't notice the unmarked black car parked across the street. Or the man inside, the same one from the supermarket security footage, holding a small device that blinked red every time Rex moved. The man smiled. Phase 2 had just begun. Rain tapped softly against the windshield of the black SUV as it idled outside the precinct. Inside, the man in the dark coat watched through the window binoculars, his gaze fixed on the rooftop where Officer MIA Sandoval stood beside her K-9 partner. His fingers drummed silently on a handheld device that pulsed red with each reading. The frequency matched Rex's biosignature. The test had worked. The dog's exposure had left him changed, just as the files suggested. But now that Rex had proven sensitive to the compound's presence and had led law enforcement straight to the contaminated scene, it meant the experiment was no longer covert. It was compromised. He pulled a small earpiece from his coat pocket and clicked it on. Initiate contingency. The dog is a threat. The officer too. We move tonight. Back inside the precinct, MIA was still struggling to process the full implications of what she'd learned. Rex had not just sniffed out a chemical, he had sensed something most living beings wouldn't even recognize. Something buried in his system for who knows how long. A weaponized version of a synthetic stimulant once designed for soldiers, now leaked or perhaps deliberately released into the civilian world. Homeland Security's warnings echoed in her head, he may be the key to tracking future attacks. Or their target. She looked down at Rex, who now rested on his mat in the corner of her apartment, eyes closed but clearly not asleep. He, too, was waiting. Her phone buzzed. A message from Detective Ruiz, got something. Meet me at the old train yard, 9th and Lincoln. Urgent. Come alone. Her brow furrowed. That wasn't like Ruiz. He hated cryptic messages and would never ask her to come alone, especially not to an isolated location. She quickly dialed his number. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. She crouched beside Rex and gently clipped his harness on. Something's wrong. We're not going in blind. 15 minutes later, she parked a block away from the train yard, one hand on her holstered sidearm, the other gripping Rex's lead. The yard had long since been abandoned, rusting train cars stood like tombstones in the darkness, and the only light came from a distant street lamp casting flickers across the broken concrete. MIA moved silently, the soft pad of Rex's feet the only sound beside her breath. The air was damp and heavy. She reached for her radio. Dispatch, this is Officer Sandoval. I'm responding to a tip at 9th and Lincoln. Possible 10 to 71. Can I get back up? Static. She tried again. Nothing. She frowned. Jammed. Suddenly, Rex stopped cold. His ears snapped upright, his muscles tensed. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Talk to me, MIA whispered, her eyes scanning the shadows. Rex pulled hard to the right, toward one of the abandoned boxcars. MIA followed, gun raised, heart thudding. As she approached the rusted metal shell, she saw something, a flicker of movement inside. Ruiz, she called. Silence. She edged closer, back to the wall, and peeked through a gap in the car's door. Inside, tied to a chair, bloodied and barely conscious, was Detective Ruiz. His eyes flicked up to meet hers, panicked. He tried to mouth something. Trap. But before she could react, the world erupted. A flashbang grenade exploded just behind her, the sound deafening, the light blinding. She hit the ground hard, ears ringing, eyes watering. Rex barked furiously, leaping over her in a protective arc as three masked figures closed in from the shadows. MIA, dazed but not down, fired blindly toward the nearest one, grazing his shoulder and causing him to drop his weapon. Rex lunged, knocking another to the ground with terrifying force, jaws snapping, claws tearing into flesh. The third attacker swung a baton at Rex, but the dog was too fast, dodging and slamming the man into a rail beam. MIA scrambled to her feet, vision swimming, and fired twice more. One bullet struck true, hitting the man who had injured Rex in the thigh. He crumpled, screaming. By the time backup sirens finally wailed in the distance, the attackers were either down or gone. MIA rushed to Ruiz, cutting his bindings with her knife. "Who did this?" she asked, panting. Ruiz, blood dripping from a cut above his eye, looked at her with haunted eyes. "Not just rogue scientists. This goes deeper. Military contractors, private labs, someone's trying to rebuild the compound, and they're field testing it on civilians." "Why?" He glanced at Rex. "Because they want to create the perfect sentinel. Like him." The days that followed were chaos. Homeland Security took over the investigation completely. The precinct was put on restricted access. Files were sealed. MIA found herself under constant observation. Every officer was ordered to report any unusual symptoms in their K-9 units. Several dogs across the state were quarantined for observation. But Rex remained the anomaly, the only one whose system showed resistance, almost an evolved immunity. Dr. Eli Chen met with MIA in secret, sliding a USB drive into her hand. "Officially, I'm not supposed to give you this. But you need to see it." "What is it?" "The original test logs." Rex was part of a training program 5 years ago, right? Before he was assigned to you. She nodded. Before that, he was part of a different program. Under a different name. MIA opened the file. Her eyes widened. It was Rex. Same markings. Same stats. But the name read, Project Sentinel 3. He was dosed with a prototype compound, Chen said. Controlled environment. They wanted to enhance olfactory tracking, emotional empathy, and decision-making under stress. The program was disbanded after 2 other dogs didn't survive. But Rex did. He was reassigned to a regular K-9 program and his file buried. MIA felt like the air had been punched from her lungs. They turned him into a weapon. Not just a weapon, Chen said. A guardian. And now that the compound has resurfaced, the people who made him want him back. That night, she didn't go home. She and Rex stayed in an old cabin outside city limits, loaned by a retired officer who owed her a favor. There, in the quiet, she tried to figure out what to do. Rex paced constantly. He didn't like being isolated. He could feel the world moving around him. At dawn, headlights flickered through the trees. MIA jumped to her feet, gun drawn. "Stand down," a familiar voice called. It was Agent Monroe. She stepped out of her vehicle and walked toward MIA slowly. "We know where they're keeping the next shipment of the compound. An underground lab in the industrial sector. But it's heavily guarded. We can't get close." "And you want Rex," MIA said flatly. "I want both of you. He can sense the compound before our scanners can. And you're the only one he listens to. We need to shut this down. Tonight." Rex stood at Mia's side, tail stiff, eyes focused. He didn't need to speak. MIA understood. They were going. The raid was swift and silent. Under cover of darkness, a joint DHS police task force infiltrated the facility. Rex led the way, his nose twitching every few steps. He veered left at a fork in the tunnel, then right at another, bypassing locked doors and false walls. Finally, he stopped. A steel door blocked their path. In there, MIA whispered. Monroe nodded. "Breach on 3. The door exploded inward. Smoke and shouting erupted. Inside, lab technicians scrambled to destroy evidence. Armed guards fired at the intruders, but the task force returned fire with precision. Amid the chaos, Rex leapt over tables, dodging bullets, barking furiously. He found a container marked S3X compound and growled. MIA fired at a tech reaching for it, then secured the vial. The firefight ended quickly. Most of the guards were captured. The remaining scientists were arrested. But the man in the dark coat, the one from the supermarket, the one who had been watching, was not among them. "Where is he?" MIA demanded. Monroe grimaced. "Gone. He was never meant to stay." Later, as dawn painted the city in bruised gold, MIA sat on the steps outside the precinct. Rex was beside her, resting his head on her lap. "You saved that baby," she whispered. "Then you saved all of us." He didn't move. Just exhaled softly, his body finally relaxed. "What now?" she asked, though she wasn't sure who she was asking. Behind her, Monroe stepped out and handed her a folder. "They've officially closed Project Sentinel. But the tech is still out there. People are still trying to recreate it. That means Rex is still the only one of his kind." MIA opened the file. Inside were documents declaring Rex permanently reassigned to her, off the books, with full autonomy. No experiments. No further tests. "He's earned his rest," Monroe said. "But if anything like this ever happens again, you'll be the first one we call." MIA nodded and looked down at Rex. "We'll be ready." And though the city carried on beneath them, and the darkness of the lab was sealed behind federal orders, Rex's ears twitched once more, just a flick. A distant siren. A subtle scent. A tremor in the wind. He was always watching. Always listening. Because he wasn't just a hero anymore. He was a sentinel.